Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to Hail Yes, a Detroit Free Press podcast about University of Michigan athletics. I'm Tony Garcia, Michigan football and basketball writer for The Free, joined by the fellas, Reiner Sabin, our Big Ten insider, Andrew Burkle, our producer and editor. After a little 1 week hiatus, unplanned, but I will accept the blame. Duty calls, had to take care of some other business, and we were all swamped with so much going on, which is why this might be a little meatier episode. But before I get into the rundown and sort of how we're going to lay things out, I got to check in on both of you and make sure I don't see any blankets. Reiner, you got the heat cranked up, because I like to have better banter than just weather talk, but it is that cold. It is feels like -5 outside. I think it's worthy to talk about the weather.
I've not been outside, so I don't know how cold it is, but I assume it's very, very cold. It looks cold outside with the snow on the ground and just the feel of it. Yes. So I if you have been outside, I sympathize with you.
Well, I have, because I have a dog, and so I've been outside, and I know that also rings true for our friend Andrew.
Yes, it was so cold that my dog was like, she ran in the snow, and then when we were walking back from just going to the bathroom, she had her little paws up in the air because they were so cold. And I was like, oh boy, that's not a good sign if it's too cold for her little padded dog feet. So I'm going to avoid going outside for the next few days. And it's colder too because it was so mild before. It was 40s, even felt like 50 there for a bit. And now it's in the negatives, just like that. So we got a long winter ahead, boys.
Well, it's an Arctic blast that's coming down. I don't know if you've seen the maps. Our friend Blake Harms, I'm sure, could tell us all about it. Shout out Blake Harms, our boy, the meteorologist formerly at WLNS Channel 6 in Lansing, now at Wood TV in Grand Rapids. All right, back to your regularly scheduled programming. Busy week. Part of the reason we couldn't get to this show, which we love to do every week, is because there was so much going on elsewhere. We needed to be writing about it and traveling to it and doing it. So now's a good time to recap it all. So very briefly, first half hoops. Try that again. First half football. Second half hoops. I was reading the word hoops as I said that. Here's what we want to talk about in the first half. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, we're going to get to it. We're reliving that OSU win and just kind of ranking it. Reiner's been around this sport for a long time. Where will that rank in his memory of I can't believe that sort of happened? Mine as well. And then sort of the momentum that created with that win with Bryce Underwood signing. Also one of the biggest flips maybe in the history of college football. I don't know if that's hyperbole. Then signing day happened where the class ranks. You got a new offensive coordinator, a transfer portal, guys coming in, guys going out. A bowl game was announced. A New Year's Eve bowl was announced. And I think I said new offensive coordinator. So lot to get to. And we want to more or less do that in order. Was that too fast? Do you guys feel like we heard everything?
I think we got a good idea of where we're going. It's just mind-numbing how much stuff has happened in that time since. It's one of those where it's been busy, and Michigan fans I'm sure know a lot's been going on, but it's holy crap, when you read it back, and you got Mason Graham, Will Johnson going in the NFL draft. I'm sure Loveland, won't be far behind here too. So it's just before you know it, you're going to be blinking and we're going to be covering the NFL draft here too. So it never stops college football. And I just remembered this. We now know when Michigan State play next year. We now know, what Michigan's schedule looks like because the Big Ten announced that yesterday as well, or I should say Wednesday. We're recording Thursday. So it's been a crazy time. And even though the games have stopped, football has absolutely not slowed down.
That's a really good point, because I want to Reiner as best we can, not too long belabor it, but work that in that bigger picture of next year's schedule into the conversation, right? With Underwood, with Chip Lindsay, the new offensive coordinator, which we'll get to, because I don't know about you guys, that looks a whole lot more doable than this year's schedule. I digress. First things first, Reiner. I know this feels like ancient history. Michigan beat Ohio State 13-10. We did have a full video recap of it and tons. We've been talking about it all over the website since then. It's 2 weeks later. I'm actually still having a little bit of a hard time wrapping my head around. Normally it settles in, and now it's yeah, that really happened. Michigan owns Ohio State, and you kind of understand it, but it's still amazing that it happened. It's really just incredible that I can't. Where does that rank for you in terms of, I don't shock factor or just, vindication factor for a fan base? I've never seen a fan base. Growing up in Ann Arbor, a lot of my childhood friends are from here. I posted something on on one of our USA Today national video channels. They had me on to preview it, and then they're asking about the game. And I'm like, can they win? Sure. Will they win? I don't know. And I got people responding to me like, oh, no chance, no chance. And then they're the same ones sharing all these videos and celebrating and going crazy. You know what I mean? Like, you had fans who were laying down like, no shot. So just with the whole perspective, how do you put your mind around it? Because it was one of the biggest wins I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously huge. Yeah, I mean, again, from what I've seen, I mean, it's probably one of the more surprising, obviously, results. I mean, I've seen, games where it was surprising for different reasons, just the way it ended or how it, but going into the game, I mean, the expectation, obviously, was that Ohio State was going to dominate Michigan, and they had the clear advantages in pretty much every area except the psychological one, which ended up being the most important in this game, I think. Again, Ryan Day and Chip Kelly went right at Michigan's strength, almost stubbornly, stupidly, whatever you want to say it. And, again, Michigan had the feeling and the belief all along that they could, beat this team. And Ohio State had to have been thinking, again, over the course of the game, whether, they were going to actually lose this game for the fourth straight year. And ultimately that happened because, again, they couldn't get out of their own way. Maybe the conditions factored into it. It was cold, brisk, and then Will Howard got hurt. But I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, again, this was a complete, utter failure on Ohio State's part. And, Michigan does get a ton of momentum, again, change the complexion of their entire season. I mean, before that, I mean, a lot of people were questioning Sharon Moore and his ability to lead this program. I mean, 5 losses. I mean, he had game management issues, the handling of the quarterback situation, the roster itself, playing Donovan Edwards over Kalel Mullins early on in the season. I mean, there were a lot of reasons to question Sharon Moore. But after that, nobody is. I mean, because that's how big of a game, and that's the effect of winning that specific game, what it can do for a program, what it can do for a coach. And so Sharon Moore is living on cloud 9 right now.
And just the air at it, right? Because Bryce Underwood, the flip had already, signing day had not happened, but the flip had already been announced.
Sure.
We had known that Bryce Underwood was going to be coming to Ann Arbor. So when signing day, the ceremony happened last week, Reiner, which you were at, and then later in Belleville that evening when Bryce signed, it was going to be essentially how Bryce Underwood is the savior, right? They were 6-6. Things were, I mean, everything was down, or they were going to be 6-6, right? They were going to have lost to Ohio State. It was going to be a very middling season. They'd be going to the Pinstripe Bowl. They just wanted to end and just get to Bryce. Now, the feeling is, if we can beat Ohio State, which has a home playoff game on the road with Davis Warren, respectfully, who threw 2 picks and 62 yards, and not a receiver who, frankly, should really be starting at the Power 5, Power 4 level. I mean, and our worst offensive line in 5 or 6 years. What's going to happen when we have this full offseason to work with and when we rebuild? Now, it's not going to be that easy because Michigan stars were the stars, right? Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant. Those are kind of the guys who won this game, and they are leaving. However, 2 of those stars who we also expect to leave, Will Johnson, who has declared, and Coastal Loveland, Andrew mentioned him, they were not in the game. Right. So that was another layer of, I mean, just how did Michigan do this without its best defensive back and truly one of its 2 offensive weapons? And so now the momentum is just now anyone can sort of take this and just keep this thing riding up, especially someone with Bryce's talent.
Well, yeah, I do think that game, though, again, can't necessarily. It has to be viewed in an isolated box. I mean, again, because of what the deal is with Ryan Day right now and Ohio State and such. I mean, we saw Michigan over the course of the season against other top competition. And I wonder if you stripped the winged helmet off and took the maize and blue out of and they played that very same team and it was different colors and different helmet, would Ohio State have done the same thing against Michigan? I don't know. And I don't think they necessarily perform the same. So I think it's hard to extrapolate anything from that game and necessarily apply it to the future as it relates to how Michigan's going to do in the coming years. But at the same token, I mean, obviously what it does for Michigan's momentum and psyche can't be overstated.
That's the aspect. And all of them play together, right? When you have momentum as a program,
Sure.
you sign bigger recruits, you get better players, and then it snowballs and it builds on itself. And I mean, you even saw some of the flips after, right? And just in recruiting, right?
I do think that stuff was in the works already even before that result. And I don't know if recruiting now.
Probably. I don't know the timing of it.
Recruiting is really based on like a game result as much as it may have used to be. I mean, I just don't think it. I mean, there's so many other factors that specifically NIL being the cheap one that I don't think those little things necessarily help. I think it more helps from an optics of the fan base and the enthusiasm level and the mood of the program going in the off season. Now, I mean, again, as it relates to Ohio State, I mean, I don't know how they're going to look at it too, because they're going to have to assess what went wrong, obviously, in that game. They're not going to really be able to adjust talent-wise or do anything differently other than playing the game differently going into next year. And so I don't know how that relates to, again, Michigan's situation. But as far as Michigan is concerned, you know, again, they have to feel pretty good considering that was their weakest team in a long time and they beat Ohio State. And so they should be able to go toe-to-toe in the future, assuming they have better players. Problem is, though, some of those, like you mentioned, those core players, they don't have replacement level players like that on the current roster. So they're going to have to be aggressive in the portal.
And that's what we'll get to as we talk about this momentum, which they're taking in the offseason. And they just had this signing day, right? And I think your point is valid, right? Certainly the calculus and the way wins and momentum like that affected a recruit's decision is no longer like it was in 06, right? Like, oh, you're not getting money, you're not getting cars and clothes and all these deals. It's just, oh, I'm just going to go wherever they're winning. And so the head-to-head results were everything. Certainly it's not that. I don't know that it's nothing, right? I mean, I think that was I think it was good, very good for Michigan.
But what did you say it would have hurt? I mean, if it helped Michigan that much, I mean, wouldn't it hurt Ohio State that much more? I mean, considering how embarrassing it was. I mean, it was more of an embarrassment to Ohio State than it was like this amazing win, because again, it was such an isolated win for Michigan in the context of a 7-5 season. I mean, it was the outlier, you know, whereas with Ohio State, it was more a continuation of like, oh, they can't beat Michigan. And where is this program going? And is Ryan Day even going to be here next year? And yet I don't see that necessarily affect their recruiting clock.
My point of view is getting a little bit boxed in here. I do see what you're saying. The only kind of still sliver I still see, could still see this through, is because of all the things you're also saying, right? Like, because Ohio State it is still Ohio State. Again, we're not sure, but like, there's a lot of money. There's a great tradition. It's not just the wins, like you said. And so there's plenty to keep people around. Whereas Michigan, they always had everything, right? It was just if they're headed in the wrong direction, that might not be the place you want to commit. That win could be enough to be like, hey, dude, we didn't go anywhere. We had a really tough schedule. We bungled the quarterback thing. That's not happening again. We're going all in on NIL. Have you seen our girl Jolene? Have you talked to Larry Ellison? You say, what's up to Dave Portnoy? We got this thing handled. Like, just come, like, just. So I think there's something there. But we could go on and on about it. The fact of the matter is, Michigan has its first top 10 recruiting class since 2019. And its first top 9 class, because that class was 10th, since 2017. In 2017, they finished 5th. Currently, Michigan's class is rated 9th. And it's not just Bryce Underwood, right? It's Andrew Babalola, the 5-star offensive tackle. It's Shamari Earls, who is a 4-star fringy 5-star defensive back. Nathaniel Marshall was really that flip that we were talking about earlier, who did come back. He was pledged to Michigan early in the spring. He flipped to Auburn before the season, and then a couple days after Ohio State, he's now back in the fold with Michigan. He's in the mix. You got, did I say Andrew Marsh, the wide receiver? I mean, all these guys, I mean, these are all top 100 players, right? And that's part of it. But I don't want to steal your thunder. I'm just going to set it up, and I want you to talk about it because it's a great point. They are really going to, that's a good start. They're going to have to supplement this hard with the transfer portal, specifically in the trenches, because that's where they've won. That's where they do everything. A, it wasn't great this year. And B, some of those not great pieces are leaving. And so you get offensively speaking, the defensive line, tremendous.
I was going to say,
tremendous.
Yeah.
Sorry. The O-line, not good. The D-line, the best in the nation. And that's just as concerning because you might have to replace every starter. I'm guessing Derek Moore returns, but I think the other three are all gone.
Yeah. I mean, and then you've got, guys that you have to replace in the secondary. A big portion of that is going to be gone. And then you have the receiving core that you mentioned. This needs to be upgraded. Absolutely. I mean, they haven't been a place that young receivers end up hitting the ground running and go on. I mean, going back to Nico Collins, I mean, it took him some time to get involved in the offense back then. So, I mean, yeah, they're going to have to do some major work in the portal to supplement this roster. There's not a lot of, again, replacement level players currently on the roster. I mean, when you look at the freshman and sophomore classes, which were kind of negatively affected and not that impressive because of Jim Harbaugh's flirtations during each of those cycles, you don't have a lot of top level contributors. I mean, again, Samaj Morgan was the only all Big Ten selection from either of those classes this past season, and he only was an honorable mention selection on special teams. So that's concerning if you're Michigan, because again, the year before when they won the national championship, 5 players from the freshman and sophomore classes, the underclassmen, were selected to the all Big Ten team. 4 of those guys were, Graham, Grant, Loveland, and Johnson. And so those guys are all leaving too now. So where does Michigan go from here?
Yeah, I mean, today's day and age, it's all about supplementing with the portal, right? And I think that Michigan needs to kind of supplement what they had last year. Find the receivers and find the offensive linemen to boost them up so they can run it more consistently. But they also need a little bit of star power there too, because of the guys who are leaving. But bigger picture question, I did want to ask you guys about the whole Larry Ellison Portnoy situation because I don't think we've talked about it. The whole way it was covered, it was in the New York Post, and it was like kind of in these like really weird, dark, like how Tom Brady and one of the richest men on the earth, brought this high school football player to Michigan. Like, just had an air of like mysteriousness kind of around it. Reiner, I'm just kind of curious. You've covered, a million different recruiting battles over the years and stuff. Have you ever seen anything like this? And do you think going forward, the kind of, cloudiness and questions surrounding it and how it all came together, do you think that almost kind of creates an advantage for Michigan? Because there's almost like this narrative out there now that like, hey, look, they have this money man behind the scenes.
Kind of, but I mean, I think it created a false impression though, initially, that this kind of money was going to be available to everyone. And I think that you saw that, I mean, at least from reading between the lines with the Derek Meadows recruitment and everything else, that like there's these players that assume that just, Michigan's just got this huge NIL piggy bank that's just been created. And now everybody can, basically feed from the trough, to kind of use the pig analogy. But essentially that everybody is going to be able to benefit from this. And no, I don't think it was necessarily that. I did find the whole thing about why they wanted to even publicize that Larry Ellison was involved. Usually these guys like to kind of stay in the shadows, especially it seems like Larry Ellison seems to have a private life. Consider this Jolin character who's, purportedly his wife was never reported to be his wife before that. And so all of a sudden it came out that it was. And I mean, there is kind of this mystery element that sparks intrigue, but at the same time, I don't know what it indicates long term. I mean, is this going to be just a one-off thing, or, is Michigan going to really be just a huge player in the NIL market? And so far, I mean, like, it didn't seem like there was much movement after Underwood in that sense. I mean, besides the Marshall flip, I mean, it wasn't like all of a sudden Michigan was flipping all these like 5-star level players, and there were other 5-star players that were flipping to other programs. I mean, like you look at the quarterback that flipped from Ohio State to Oregon, from out of Alabama.
They got Marshall, but they lost out on Olesh, the tight end, right, who ended up going to Penn State.
Right, exactly.
So it's like, it's not kind of like that goes a little bit of a balance. So you're kind of saying it was more of a break glass in case of emergency situation because everybody watched Davis Warren, everyone watched Jack Tuttle, everyone watched Alex Orji, and it's like, oh my God, we got to make this happen.
Yeah, I think that was there was a sense of urgency. Now, I mean, Sharon Moore poo-pooed that idea, but I mean, the fact is that Dave Portnoy said even back in October, and now I don't know how involved Portnoy was, and his involvement may have been overstated, based on, again, reading between the lines here. At the same token, I mean, it's like he said that this is never going to happen again, and I'm going to invest, a certain amount of money in getting us a quarterback. That's what he said. And so you have to kind of think that there was that discussion among the rest of the donor class at Michigan. And I do think that they looked at the situation, and Sharon Moore situated, this guy is not going to be successful in this current age if we don't ante up the money to find top level skill players, especially at the quarterback position.
I think it's also secondarily, I mean, not that they did it intentionally. I wonder if it's not, I mean, also depending on what they do with the transfer portal, I wonder if it's not an indictment on Jaden Davis, the 4-star true freshman who's in the room right now, because he was never handed the keys at any point this year, even though he was a true freshman. They could have done it late, kept his red shirt and thing and whatnot. And then secondarily, there's obviously been, we're talking about the portal and all of these places they need to supplement. There's a non-zero chance that they look at some, the reports are they're talking to Miller Moss, right? Out of USD.
Yeah. I mean, Sharon Moore said that they want a quarterback. They want an experienced quarterback.
Considering they could have just gone and gotten the Miller, like, think about this money they're spending, right? You can clearly go land, like, hey, we just put JJ in the NFL, top 10, we're getting a new OC, come here. You can sell that pitch, right? But they wanted to make sure that this thing is like, we are set for the next few years, right? They didn't want to be doing this time after time after time. And there's nothing to stop them from still going to the transfer portal and having Bryce Underwood as a Dante Moore.
I think that having an insurance policy for Underwood is smart. I mean, how many true freshmen do you see come in right away and truly, especially when they have the pressure on them like Underwood would have, first of all. Secondly, this entire, conversation around Underwood of like, well, should they have spent the money elsewhere and brought in, like, that's just not, it's not a realistic conversation, because that kind of money wouldn't have been there for, an offensive guard or, a left tackle and a defensive tackle. It's just not how it works. They wouldn't have been able to take that money and sprinkle it across, especially not how the program is currently built. You listen to like what Belichick is saying now at UNC. He wants to do NFL style. And if they are getting consistently, hey, we're getting $20 million a year, you can use however you want. Okay, that changes things. But the way it currently is, where you're kind of getting everyone, and it's all based on excitement and who can raise the money, that kind of money is not there to build out the roster in the same way. I mean, the red glaring flag was quarterback, and the fan base, whether it was one guy or a collective, stepped up and got him at quarterback, and maybe two. I think that's kind of how it went. I don't think it would have been there for a right guard. And also, I mean, with the you're not selling right guard merch, right? They already got QB1, 19, Underwood. I mean, the amount of jerseys and Bryce Underwood merchandise that's going to be sold is going to be bananas. I mean, that's all everyone's going to be wearing, right? And so there's layers to it. Last Bryce Underwood. Local kid too.
Oh, yeah. Last Bryce Underwood thought from you, Reiner, before we take our next step here.
Well, I mean, again, it's going to be interesting to see if they do add a portal QB, what the timeline is for Underwood. I mean, in theory, he probably only wants to be here 3 years and go to the NFL. So you want to maximize his value if you're Michigan and the people that anteed up the money for him. So, I mean, how much pressure is there going to be to start him early on? And I think that's going to be something, to watch going forward. And also just the effect of what his arrival means for the rest of this program. I mean, again, they've had this transformational, not transactional model that they have kind of clung to for so long. I mean, it's kind of ingrained in the program. Is that slowly being phased out? I mean, is Sharon Moore moving towards more of what college football is these days, where it's a much more dynamic? And is he willing to just, turn over the roster and not reward loyalty? I asked him that question. I was like, are you going to reward the players that have been here, or are you going to seek alternatives? And he said the priority right now is to reward the players who have been through kind of the adversity of this season going forward, and then supplement it with depth pieces. But I mean, he may come to find that, he has no other alternative but to kind of, go full into the transfer portal model that other programs like, again, Michigan State has done or did initially under Mel Tucker in 2021. I mean, they were kind of the first to do that. I mean, you have Ole Miss that has no qualms about basically signing over or, replacing over guys that were current on the roster and just moving on from, dead weight, essentially. So
Ohio State went out and signed blue chip guys, right? They're like, Caleb Downs is available. Sure, we'll take him.
Yeah,
please.
Sure. Yeah.
That's...
Or Will Howard over Kyle McCord,
Yeah. And this roster, Michigan's team now, if they were to roll it back, none of us agree that if they didn't make some, if they just added depth guys, kind of like they did last year, this team's not going to be good enough to win 10, 11 games next year. There's no way.
Michigan is absolutely going to do. I mean, think about it. Andrew Gentry and Dom Gadis and Raheem Anderson and I forget the fourth offensive lineman I'm forgetting off the top of my head. They don't all just enter the transfer portal for no reason. They were
not a Michigan.
My understanding is that there was a wink, wink, nod, nod. This didn't fly this year. Either you started and that was a problem, or you didn't even start. And it's going to be better than this next year. So you're going to need to find somewhere else to play. That's already happening here. And it's not like that hasn't happened. Jim Harbaugh always tried to play like that didn't happen. But there were disgruntled 3-star recruits frequently who would say behind the scenes, not frequently, on more than one occasion, that contact just stopped, or the implication was like, even after they were told one thing, right? Like it happened, and not just here, it happens at all programs. The job is to get the best talent. Once in a while, it does happen that someone is a casualty of that, right? Hey, we thought we had a spot for you. I got really bad news. There's a hotter girl at the bar and we're making eye contact, and I'm going to go walk over there and I'm going to see what she has to say. Sorry. You're really cute. You're really cute. It's not about
now
you.
All this money is involved. I think there's, back 10 years ago, whatever, when a college coach would kind of jerk kids around and all of a sudden he's out of a scholarship and he's looking for a place to play. I mean, now that all this money is involved, there's no hiding what this is. This is a professional sport, and it obviously always has been, but there was a lot of like smoke and mirrors, and now it's just like, literally, I keep bringing them up, but Belichick signing and saying we're going to run a professional programming, and with all that stuff, and the whole reason he signed with UNC was because they're like, hey, it's actually quicker to rebuild in college than it is in the NFL because of the transfer portal. It's free agency. You can literally go get anybody you want for the right price tag. That doesn't exist in any other big time sport.
Yeah, it's just interesting because, again, some of these teams, though, I mean, have handled it better than others. I mean, look at Florida State this past year. I mean, they tried to totally change over the roster, and it totally blew up in their face. So, I mean, it's a delicate balancing act with Sharon Moore. I mean, he's gonna have to try to find where he can really go all in and not disrupt the fabric. I do think that there was some kind of strong culture that actually did exist within that locker room this past season, that was a remnant of the national championship teams and the 3-year 40-3 run that Michigan had. I mean, that's why they were still fighting, I guess, late in that game against Indiana, again, going forward with the Northwestern game, and then obviously what they did against Ohio State. I mean, they stayed in the fight. I mean, they could have probably dropped the ball at some point. I do wonder how this is going to end up affecting if he does go all the way in on the portal, the locker room.
Right. There's no doubt about it that, at least from how I see it, that the heart and soul of the team that carried over is really what bonded this thing. And now they are going to be tested moving forward, right? And you wonder if they didn't have the depth this year, right? Like you can see all the X's and O's reasons why they were not going to be as good, and the coaching switch staffs and this and all the changes that happened. It was and this harder schedule, it was always going to be a step back. I wonder if also just some of those leaders, right? Like these are unbelievable players. None are they're limited in the upside of their leadership. They needed more JJs, more Blakes, more Mikey Senior Stills, and of course that's also talent too. But the guy like Will Johnson is not a vocal guy. Colston Loveland is kind of a goofy dude. Mason, KG, they're understated guys. Rod Moore was hurt, right? And I think they had enough guys in the locker room to keep it together, but nobody, and I'd ask them about this at different times throughout the year, right? Like, who's going to grab someone and shake them, right? And you can do that during Ohio State week because everybody knows what that is. I wonder if there wasn't a time earlier in the year where they could have had one of those moments, maybe a little bit, but that's just a random thought about it because they are going to have to rebuild with so much elite talent. And let's talk about that as we spit it forward to the bowl game quickly and then move on to basketball. Mason is gone. Will Johnson is gone. KG and Colston Loveland, we are waiting on potential other holdouts. Josiah Stewart, who knows? And what will they be holding out of? The ReliaQuest Bowl in Tampa, where 7-5 Michigan is playing 9-3. You guessed it, Alabama. Once again, Reiner just giddy. He gets to see all his old media friends again. But no, I just smirked when I saw. I'm like, of course it's Alabama. I'm like, of course we're going to see Alabama. Although, yeah, Reiner, we're working on scheduling and travel for the bowl game. But anyways, it is Alabama still, and there will be holdouts and guys declaring for the draft. What do you think quickly about this bowl game? There's been a ton of juice, and that's all we would have been talking about in years past. Now it's just kind of a thing we're talking about in the greater scheme of everything else.
I mean, it's an exhibition game. I mean, supposedly, again, Sharon's more says that they are playing to win the game. To me, I think that's kind of foolhardy. I think they should be looking to get a real firm assessment, the younger players, and who can actually really contribute. I mean, they're going to get a baseline assessment against Alabama because I assume they're going to probably have similar level players that they're going to want to get a look at too. So you're going to be this could be looked at as like, kind of a Senior Bowl type exhibition, or an additional spring game for Michigan, and should be used as that so that they can use this to kind of get an idea of what they really need in the portal. Because again, the portal window will close, but that doesn't mean that there won't be players still in there that they can add over the course of the next week or so before the semester starts. I mean, they want to get them in before the start of the winter semester, obviously, to be enrolled and ready to go for spring practice and such. So, and go through the winter conditioning program and such. So this game could actually help them in that sense. Unfortunately, it's kind of on the later end of the timeline because of the December 31st, but would have been helpful if it was probably a week earlier. But in that sense, I think that they should use this to kind of get a firm look at the younger players who are going to be possibly part of their future.
We need to talk about Chip Lindsay, the new offensive coordinator, very quickly. He coached Drake May previously. North Carolina football took a step back this year. Their quarterback was injured, and the issue really was not their offense, right? They average 32 points a game. They have one of the best running backs in the nation, Amarian Hampton, and they're like top 50, top 60 in both passing and rushing. I think that's the formula that Sharon Moore was looking for.
Well, the interesting thing with Chip Lindsay, I mean, I think he really wants to do power run. He comes from Gus Malzahn, but also he worked under Todd Monken. Who does Todd Monken coordinate for? The Baltimore Ravens. Yes, right. And so I think that there's a lot of crossover there, and that's where the hire kind of came from. The idea that, again, Chip Lindsay is going to lean on the run game and use that to kind of set up the pass game, which is, I think, what Sharon Moore wants to do. And he's shown some success there. I mean, I think he had, 8 straight years over different programs. I mean, he's been at Southern Miss, Arizona State, Auburn, UCF, and UNC. But generally, the common thread is that they score over 30 points a game, generally productive. He's not the best offensive mind, but I think he's I think he's a strong candidate and a strong person to kind of take over for Kirk Campbell. Certainly, he's better than Kirk Campbell and has a much better track record.
Oh, the upgrade is notable without question. And the fit, right? The fit of what he wants to do.
Sure.
You mentioned it, the tree, stylistically. He understands complementary football. And that is still what Michigan wants to be, right? But they want to have the upside of a 5-star quarterback and big wide receivers, right? They don't want to be running this with walk-ons and 5'11" dudes. And then when you're behind the sticks and you are 3rd and 7, I mean, we've mentioned it on this pod before. We talked about, JJ was unbelievable in 3rd and long the year before. They were rare when they were in 3rd and long, but when they were, they could get it done. They could hit Roman Wilson on a crosser. They could hit Cornelius Johnson on the slants, or Loveland, right? They had options. None of that was there this year. And so you want to be able to stay ahead of the sticks, and when you're not, have the talent outside to get it through. I like the hire. I mean, he wasn't on my radar. Otherwise, it would have been on my list. But as always, when you see it, when you reverse engineer it, good stuff. All right, there we go. That's going to put a bow on the football stuff, unless Reiner had one more thought.
No, the only one concern with Lindsay is just I wonder how much the tempo is going to be a thing, like where he tries to push the tempo too much. I mean, there is a kind of a balance there. I mean, Gus Malzahn ran that hurry up, no huddle. And sometimes, again, the defense would be taxed. You didn't always think about, the impact on the defense. So the question is, how much does he do that while also kind of understanding that, he has to account for the effect on his own defense. But at the same time, he does like to feature the run game. So that will take time off the clock.
Former head coach, right? So, I mean, he's going to understand the balance, right? I mean, he's not like he's completely blind to it in offensive. He was head coach at Troy and,
Sure.
Played for Mac Brown, who's kind of an older school coach for Mac Brown. I mean, I feel like it shouldn't be something they can't figure out. It's not like everybody's running this Chip Kelly hurry up offense anymore.
I was gonna say it's at UNLV and that go-go gadget, whatever they call it, in Western Kentucky, like where it's just. I think there's probably options, but okay, we really got to take a break. All right, we'll be back, and then we'll talk hoops. This is Hell Yes. All right, welcome back. Sorry about that. Got a little long-winded with the football stuff, but we told you there was a lot to catch up on. Same goes for hoops. Had we recorded this any other day, the vibes would have been really high. Now they're still high, just a little bit of water was poured on the scorching hot fire that was Michigan basketball. I just got back from New York, where the Wolverines lost to Arkansas 89-87, I think was the final. Man, what a game. What a game. What an atmosphere. Michigan was up 15, then they're down 18, then they're inside of a bucket 3 different times in the final minute and a half. Let me tell you, my game story reflected the helter-skelterness that was this game. I mean, it's just, you don't expect 2 blown 15-point leads. 1 is kind of a lot to rewrite. Once it happens a second time, you're really screwed. Okay, that's just my thought. But in any event, Michigan still, they were 14th entering this game, both coaches polling at AP. 7-1, they had won 7 straight entering the contest. 8-2 overall on the year. They had just beaten Virginia Tech, Xavier, Wisconsin, Iowa, 4 very notable wins in a row. I guess I'd like to get, I've been around them a lot, so I have my thoughts. I'd like to see what you guys have watched, observed, seen. What are your thoughts on Dusty May's Wolverines 10 games in? And we can start with what you saw most recently against Reiner's alma mater, Arkansas.
All I got to say is woo pig suey.
Yeah, you're not allowed to say that on here. You're going to get flack for that. Oh my word!
I'm doing the hard call right now.
Yeah, that's the first time I've seen it. It's a lot.
It is a lot. It is a lot.
You turn your head and you kind of.
It's awesome though to see it though in an arena like with 20,000 people and 20,000 people though. Bud Walton when it's cranked up is a pretty awesome environment. And as you saw, Tony, Arkansas fans will travel to anywhere to see the Hogs play basketball. So, but no, that was a really entertaining game. Obviously, I had a vested interest in watching it, not only because I'm around Michigan's program, but because it involved, like you said, my alma mater. But yeah, looking at again, Michigan, despite losing that game, they still, showed incredible fight in that, and they have all the pieces to make a real deep run, I think, in the tournament still. I saw it before the season and I wrote about it, but they really have options everywhere. The question with them is, they are so streaky because I think they like to shoot 3-pointers, and so sometimes they fall and sometimes they don't. And then you add the aspect that you've written about the last couple games is the turnovers. They can get out in transition, and turn you over, but they also commit a lot of mistakes themselves and at times go cold. So they're a very streaky team, I think. But again, this is a team that overall looks pretty darn good.
Andrew, I want to hear your thoughts before I say. I kind of wrote what I really think about this team in a story after Iowa, but not everybody reads every story, and I'm happy to espouse on that further once I hear Andrew's assessment.
I mean, the most impressive thing about that last game was, how many times you watch a basketball game where you come out hot, you let the thing slip away, you're down by 18, next thing you lose by 25, 30, 18, whatever it is, somewhere in that range. To come all the way back after that, I mean, it's a very old story in basketball where you make the comeback and then your legs, you don't have the legs for the last few minutes. You use all your energy coming back, right? So, early season, December, non-conference games, like this is the exact kind of game you want to have. You know what I mean? Like, hey, these are the lessons we learned. I mean, the coach up the road in the East Lansing has been trying to schedule games like this and is probably watching enviously saying, I wish that was our team in this game, playing a game like that where you get off to a good start, end up blowing the lead, take the lead back, it's just like complete chaos and the kind of thing that happens in March. And I think this game will really prepare the team well going forward. I'm absolutely love Danny Wolf and his game and everything he brings to the table. Side note, if you're watching the broadcast, drinking game at home would be drink every time they say 2 7-footers. I mean, it's just like 50 times a game. Look at this, 7-footer, 2 7-footers, 2 7-footers, 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 7-footers. It's like obnoxious, but I understand why, because I can't remember seeing a man of his stature, both physically in height and weight, with a handle of that degree. The way he puts the ball on the floor and is running a pick and roll with Vlad, and the timing and when to put the ball on the floor, or when to like kick it out to the corners, and his finishing around the rim. I mean, I think this guy is a first round pick, and I'm calling it now. I think Danny Wolf might win Big Ten Player of the Year. In a year when you don't have a Zach Edey, if Michigan keeps winning, they're already 2-0 in the Big Ten. I think he's a legitimate Big Ten Player of the Year candidate because, he had 9 assists against Arkansas. Only had 1 against Iowa, but those assist numbers are going to keep going up. And the entire offense runs through him. And I'm not a huge believer in their guards, but at the end of the game, Michigan lost because they weren't getting him the ball. Jay Billis is like pounding the table. Like, why are they not passing to Danny Wolf in these go-ahead situations? He's getting them a good look. It's like Jokic-esque, some of these passes.
They did get him the ball on the final look, right? They got on the inbound, yeah.
The final possession, but the 2 or 3 before that, there was missed opportunities where, Donaldson kind of flies down the floor and Burnett sometimes doesn't have the greatest floor vision, I would say. I mean, as long as they keep running everything through Danny Wolf, I think anything is possible for this team. And I think they're going to kind of figure out that that's their identity and you're already seeing it. This Arkansas game, they were running everything through them even more. So I don't even care about the turnovers. I mean, if you're 7 feet tall, for him.
In this instance, certainly. And hey, first of all, Team Danny Wolf. The first player I wrote, when I went in and worked out with Matt Aldred over the summer, and I was talking to...
You got to pump in with them? You worked out with them?
I did.
You actually did?
Yeah. Didn't you read the story? He put me through the workout.
I know. But
I did not know that. I missed it.
No, I know. I went, come on. It was investigative. It was investigative journalism. The whole point was
technical foul on myself.
Yeah, for real. I thought you were calling a timeout on me. No, you're throwing a T on yourself. Good. Yeah. So the point of the story was Matt Aldred was hired very specifically by Dusty May because, as he told me, he's not a big S little T type of coach, or little C type of coach, right? Strength and conditioning, right? He's like, they're both the same. And so he knows they're going to be running this up-tempo offense, and he's got these 7-footers. He's going to have to keep in condition and all these different little things. And working with Danny Wolf specifically, they said they knew he was going to be okay on offense. Their concern was on defense, the lateral movement, and they just went to work all off season on mobility, on agility, on being able to work outside. And then when I was talking to someone that day, they said, they're like, we actually didn't know what we had in Danny Wolf. Like, we thought we got something. And this is like 2 months in. This whole team is not even together for the summer. And they're like, this is the guy. This is the guy. Because just 7-footers don't put the ball on the deck like this. You don't run a pick and roll with 2 7-footers, not in college, not with a guy who was under-recruited and spent a couple years at Yale as a center and was like an inside-out five. I mean, it's what he does is remarkable. However, you can't fully excuse the turnovers. You can't. In this game, you can. 9-3. I mean, a 3-1, of course. There have been too many games where Danny Bull, I mean, look at he has every single game. This is only the third game out of 10. He hasn't had at least 4 turnovers. That's too many. It's too many. He's given the ball. I think he turned the ball over more than anybody in the Big Ten. He was top 10 in the country in turnovers, and the other 9 were all primary guards. And so I get that you run the offense through him, but you just
what kind of turnovers do you think he has? Because I don't see like he's not committing like AJ Hogard. Like, dude, did you just fall asleep and throw the ball out of bounds from point blank? A lot of times it's like maybe he needs like a quarterback. He needs to tone it down just a little bit on aggressiveness because it seems like sometimes his players aren't even ready for the passes he's throwing. You know what I mean? Which that's only going to get better as the season gets going. It's not like he's carelessly dribbling off his foot that often.
That's my greater point. Short of turnovers, I don't see why, or like other than turnovers, or the cold shooting day, right? Or the plucky team that you don't want in the tournament, right? We all know the caveats. Michigan looks like a Final Four team to me. Looks like that type of like that type of build. You usually want like a team that can make that type of run. You usually want a little more guard play, and that would be the concern. But
guards scare me a little bit.
Trey Donaldson is better than he's played. I think he started hot early in the season. He's had a couple games. Roddy Gale's been a little That's going to happen when you're running offense through the 7-footers, right? They've been trying to get Vlad going, and Danny's been running the offense. They said they didn't want, they don't have one point guard. Everybody facilitates this offense. And so everybody's got to learn how to play within it.
The guards don't play off Wolf that well for how good of a passer he is. Him and Vlad have fantastic chemistry already, or seen the last few games. I feel like the guards don't really know where to cut or where to be off of him that well.
I know you say it's a Final Four team. I'm not really willing to go there because the defense is just not there. It just isn't. I mean, against they're
15th in KenPom defensively.
But I mean, against top, again, scoring teams. I mean, they gave up again, Iowa 83. They gave up, 89 to Arkansas. I mean, and I've watched
those are fast-paced teams, though.
I've watched Arkansas though this year. Not very streaky, not the best, outside shooting, and not always a great offensive team. I mean, if you look at the numbers,
they've been Arkansas has been injured. Cal was talking about it. They had 3 weeks where they had like literally 5 dudes they were running with. They also have a couple 5-star freshmen, right? Who are gonna have nights, right? One of them's from the New York area. He's back at MSG. Boogie had a good night. Iowa. That's what they do. Iowa gets up and down the court, and Michigan knew going into it. But they limited Iowa in transition. They limited specific things. And Wisconsin had scored 80 points in every game other than one, and it was like 79 going into Michigan. Michigan held them to 64. That was a rock fight. Michigan is 15th in KenPom defensively, and they are 20th in opponents' effective field goal percentage. They do not let you shoot layup. I mean, they're like, when they're going right. Agreed. It was a bad week. There was a couple of bad matchups. Not a good trend. Mike Boynton knows how to coach a defense. They held Xavier to 53.
Xavier was the ideal game. I mean, obviously. I mean,
they held TCU to 64. They held, TCU 64. Xavier 50.
TCU was missing one of its best players.
Wisconsin 64. Virginia Tech 63.
Here's the thing. Personnel-wise, there's no reason they can't be a good defensive team, and I've shown flashes of it, so that's why I'm not as worried about it. I wouldn't go quite Final Four yet. I'm not like, oh man, that team's as one of the 4 best teams in the country right now, but they're sweet.
I think they're a second weekend team.
Week 16 weekend, without question.
What I'm saying, I'm not going to go guarantee a Final Four. I would recommend grabbing a Final Four ticket right now. It's going to be worth a whole hell of a lot less money in a month or two. I'm just telling you, those odds will go down. They will go down.
The key that you touched on, Tony, was, and this is good foresight by May and should make Michigan fans feel good, is that they identified that we need to have Wolf be able to stay on the floor as a defensive entity as well as an offensive entity, and they worked on shuffling his feet. And it's kind of like when you see the white guy on the floor in the NBA and he's
on there to shoot.
And every guy all of a sudden is like, here we go. And they like start picking on him. And then they're like, oh, wait, he might actually be a little bit better defender than you think. Like you see sometimes like a guard will size up Wolf and he's got enough length and enough quickness with his feet to stay in front of them just enough and rack up some blocks along the way. And he feeds everybody right into Golden, right? He feeds everyone into him. So I think I'm not super concerned about their defense overall. I think, obviously that's the question mark. That and turnovers, right? Outside of that, they're going to get good shots. And they're not an exceptional shooting. They're not an exceptional shooting team either.
They're not exceptional. They're darn good though. They are seventh in the nation in 2-point percentage. And I mean, they're good at threes.
I was talking about threes.
They're 84th. So not great, but
good enough.
They're in the green in Ken Palm. You're not going to lose. You're not going to, I mean, that's not like your weakness, right? And if it is, that's a really good weakness. But I mean, 7th in 2-point percentage field goals and 84th. They are 334th in turnovers. They turn the ball over on 21.4% of their possessions. If you can just get to 200, that's bottom half, right? But not be bottom 10% in America, and you get 5 more possessions a game.
But isn't that kind of like Michigan State's shooting when they were like 0 for a gazillion to start the year, and then everyone was like, well, it's going to be better than that.
I think it's very similar.
That's how their turnovers kind of are, right? They're not going to be the worst turnover team in the nation. If they get to the hundreds, the 150s, that's. I mean, because it's kind of like the Golden State Warriors. They're going to turn the ball over, but they're going to get a lot of good shots, and there's a point of no return where there's too many where you can't win. There's just too many. But and maybe that's what happened in the Arkansas game. Maybe that was, the breaking point. Maybe that's their line. But you're going to have to live with those turnovers. That's why I said I'm not as worried about the turnovers, because first of all, mathematically, you'd think that they're going to come down. And secondly, they're a high-paced team with a 7-footer playing point guard. Like, they're going to have turnovers. But they're so unique and so matchup. They're a matchup nightmare. You know what I mean? Like, who has someone who can guard Danny Wolf? 3 teams in the country, So I think that's what's promising.
No, I'm with you. And I know this sounds random. They've gotten almost literally nothing out of Reuben Jones. Literally 0. He scored like 7 or 8 points this year. I mean, okay, maybe he has like 12. I don't know. But he can't be averaging more than a point or 2. And I mean, just this last game, 2 points, 1 of 3 from the field. I mean, he had 3 assists. Okay, 3 assists. I mean, that might be his best game. Yeah, I mean, so there are some pieces to get a little more from. And I mean, 20th in 2-point percentage defense, 6th in 3-point percentage defense. Opponents are only shooting 30.1%. They do a lot right on both sides of the ball. They're well coached. And like you said, Andrew, I mean, all the teams they've played early already, we're just going to go through it one more time. Wake Forest, TCU, Virginia Tech, Xavier, Wisconsin, Iowa, Arkansas, and now up next is Oklahoma. Thus far, they have 2 losses on 2 neutral courts to 2 Power 4 teams that both came into the season. With NCAA tournament expectations.
That's a big boy non-conference schedule.
They are. I'm telling you, they're gearing up. They're winning as they're taking lumps. They're not playing that great, and they're winning, right? And there's no shame in losing to Arkansas by 2 at MSG in a thriller in December, right? And that's one. And I'm just, there's a lot to like. If you're a Michigan basketball fan, I don't know what more you could have possibly asked for out of these first 10 games. I mean, you would sign up for this 8 days a week. So that's where I stand. Final thoughts before we say adios.
It's gonna be a fun Big Ten season. There's no top dog like Purdue the last few years, but Michigan State looks really good. Michigan looks really good. Illinois.
Illinois looks good.
And UCLA are tough. There's going to be a lot of anybody can beat anybody this year. And Michigan and Michigan State are very much in that conversation as far as the teams in the state who can beat anybody. I mean, there's not a team in the Big Ten I don't think Michigan can beat. And I don't think there's not that many teams that are just, dog water at the bottom either. So it should be a really fun Big Ten year. And Michigan has set themselves up wonderfully with this tough schedule and some quality wins along the way and some not bad losses,
I'm thinking 3 seed.
The question is again, where all those other teams and how they, will end up, factoring into this, too. I mean, we're focused on Michigan, across the country. There are a lot of teams that are kind of, again, in that same vein. And, realm. So like we'll see how it plays out. But I mean, you've got to be happy if you're Michigan the way things have turned out so far of the season. And again, it seemed like it was going to come together just based on the first practice that we were able to watch. I mean, just seeing those guys go up and down, the ball movement, just the amount of different pieces and how they were kind of interchangeable and how they could play different styles because of Wolf and Golden being there, but plus the level of guard play that they had. And then you had Sam Walters, a 3-point shooter, kind of, again, 3-and-D wing type player. And then it's just, those are kind of the pieces that you need to in modern day basketball to be successful. And Michigan has all those guys.
I wasn't on hand and I didn't see it, but it came together faster than I thought it would. I thought it would take a few months and maybe by January they'd be playing pretty well and they'd be like maybe like a 8 or 10 or a 9 seed in the tournament. But I mean, from what we've seen so far, it's come together extremely quickly. A bunch of new faces who, didn't know each other and they're playing pretty well together. I think there's still some untapped potential in how they're playing well, how they play together. And that's got to be extremely exciting for Michigan basketball fans. It's going to be a fun spring.
It's going to be a really good next 4 months here. There's a little bit of a lull here. I mean, big game with Oklahoma, but then couple non-cons before. 18 straight Big Ten games to close out the regular season. That starts with a trip to LA, a double dip at the Galen Center and Pauley Pavilion. I will be there, so that'll be fun. All right, good episode, meaty episode, lot to chew on there. So hope you enjoyed it while you are taking your dog for a walk or cleaning the house, on a drive, going to the bathroom, whatever it is you do when you listen to our podcast. Whatever you do it, or wherever you do it, we appreciate it. Make sure you rate, review, and subscribe. Please share with friends and family. If you felt you learned something, if you laughed or smiled at any point and we brought entertainment value, even for 1 second, it'd be great if you shared that with someone. It is the holiday season after all. So for our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery-Nichols, for our sports editor, Bill Bradley, audio engineer, Robin Chan, for Andrew, for Reiner, I'm Tony. Thanks for listening. This is Hell Yes.